Welcome to this week's edition of Thursdays with Mike. And I'm not driving, but I am in my car, as you might have noticed. And that's for the simple reason, not just that I'm desperate to find some ways of making this more interesting by being in different places. You know, the fact is, no matter where I am, the interest level. But no, it's actually in the car for the very simple reason. Last week I was, Saturday and specifically, I was driving to Natural Grocers, pick up ingredients for Luane for a vegan pizza, which is, of course, my first choice of lunch entree would be that. But anyway, so I'm driving there, and I passed her on call, and I do a hands-free call in the car. I receive one, and it's a very irate, rankled individual. Doesn't identify himself. Doesn't say, "Hey, this is me. This is so and so." Didn't identify himself as being with the vineyard. I kind of got the impression he was just calling different churches, but he was extremely upset about the announcement. This is actually how I learned of the announcement on Saturday of the election results, was learning through this individual who was extremely upset, saying that these people are filthy animals, and I don't know what to do with all of this rage. And you're a pastor, right? So what do you have to say about this? Because these people are filthy animals. I think he said filthy animals at least 3 times. And I took this call right by the Town Square Mall on Cole Road, heading up to turn on Emerald and work my way over to Natural Grocers. So listened to him. I remember going through, beneath the underpass, passing Town Square, started talking at the light on Emerald in the left turn, and I talked for about anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. I don't know. I didn't time it. I just started giving him my perspective. And pulled up and parked at Natural Grocers, and then just concluded my thoughts and said, "So, gosh, you've been very quiet. So, does this make sense? Questions, thoughts?" And there was nothing. And so I look at my phone. It's like I've been talking to nobody because he's gone. Which is, talking to nobody is kind of like what I'm doing every time I do one of these. I think we're up to 3.5 people at this point that watch. But anyway, and then I realized that evidently he called while I was talking and left another voicemail. So I just didn't register at all. So I see then he called and said, "I'm sorry if you hung up on me. I guess you don't want to talk to me, and that makes me sad. And so sorry, Pastor, if we see differently." No name, no phone number. So just a note, if you are calling me, a name and you just say your name and phone number. So, because I actually will talk to anybody. I really will. So I couldn't call back. So I thought, well, I'm going to try and give that 3 to 5 minute answer of what to do with a rage over a political situation or election that doesn't go your way. And we'll see how I do. I mean, I've already taken like 3.5 minutes just about 4 minutes to introduce this. So let's see if I can keep it as brief. And if that person should happen to see this someday, well, you'll at least know, hey, I actually had something to say and this was it. And feel free to reach out to me and we can talk more. But this is what I said. I said, okay, so my experience with politics. I'm 61 years old, 5 kids. And so I have been around through a few political seasons and a few elections. My first experience with the political process was actually the Watergate hearings. I remember the summer of '73 as my mom was dying of cancer. I remember some of the press conferences with Nixon, and then after she died, in those numbing days in which I was displaced, I mean, essentially orphaned, because we weren't living with our dad either at that point. So we moved into a friend's house, and so it was complete displacement. And I found myself watching the Watergate hearings as I drew pictures of World War II airplanes. And so I'm drawing pictures of Messerschmitt's Messerschmitt 109s and Focke-Wulf 190s and P-51 Mustangs and B-17s, and I'm watching the Watergate hearings with John Dean and company. And the first election I remember was Jimmy Carter in '76. First election in which I voted was the election that resulted in Reagan's election after the hostage crisis just coming to an end right before that, or even on the day. I mean, it was times of great upheaval, and so went through the flip to Reagan for 2 terms, and then of course Herbert Walker Bush, the Gulf War, and then the Clinton era with 2 terms. Which was another flip, so flips this way, and all of the turbulence of the world is coming to an end. Democracy as we know it is coming to an end. The nation is finished. Pretty much, depending on how the election went and how one side or the other was reacting to it. And then, of course, we have the 2000 election with Gore and George W. Bush, and all the controversy about that, and the recount and Supreme Court. Again, democracy is over, and the election process is So I mean, so all of that. Then going through the 2 terms of Bush. Of course, then leading into the 2 terms of Obama, and I think it was at that point I have a conversation with a dear old woman who was talking about the rail cars. The cars are ready to take us away. They're coming to take us to camps, and she was unloading her books because she needed to be ready to go, and I haven't seen her since. So maybe she was loaded on a train. I don't know, or maybe they threw her from. I don't know. God bless her. And then, of course, right up through the the present, we come through the Obama era to the Trump era and the current election, and so I've seen all of this, and what it has taught me is that I've got to live with a longer view. I've got to look with a longer view. Nothing new under the sun. I've literally seen these things recycle over and over and over again. And that's not to say, and this could be an inducement towards denial. I mean, things can change drastically. I mean, Rome did go from being a republic to being an empire, and there were some significant events that brought that about as you read history, and so I'm a student of history, both ancient history, modern history, U.S. history, Civil War, World War II, and so I'm just aware of that longer view. I see how history ebbs and flows, and nations rise and nations fall. But I've seen this election cycle. And I just have to take a longer view, and that longer view is not necessarily the ultimate and eternal sustainability of the United States of America, but of the sovereign realm of God, which continues over all nations and all cultures and all political regimes and systems as they rise and fall, ebb and flow. Reading the book by Ron Chernow and Alexander Hamilton, he comments that Washington didn't think that this republic would last more than 20 years. This experiment, he thought we'd be lucky if we got 2 decades out of it, and here we are. Some would say, well, it didn't last more than 20 years, and it was all corrupted from the get-go, which starts to sound like some renditions of church history. Church was corrupted in the first few decades, and now everybody's trying to restore it and bring about a utopia that was meant to be. Anyway, but I have to take the longer view. and that's anchored ultimately in Philippians. Philippians was written by Paul as he's chained to 2 Roman soldiers around the clock, awaiting for his hearing before Emperor Nero. And we're dealing with an empire. We're dealing with what essentially was a tyrannical reign of various emperors whose sanity, frankly, is just in question. And yet, it's in this context that Paul writes Philippians, where he says, I have learned the secret of being content in any and every circumstance. I know what it is to have everything I need. I know what it is to have nothing. And that is, as he's awaiting waiting trial in a dingy Roman flat, chained to guards, uncertain future, in the hands of a tyrant who wasn't elected by anybody, because that wasn't a democracy. It wasn't even a republic at that point. There were vestiges of it, but anyway, but that's where he could write these words, and rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say it, rejoice. And he could write Philippians 2 about, just a Christ hymn of how have this mind in you, which is also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but he emptied himself. And he could write, I'm kind of doing Philippians backwards here, and he could write, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain, and yet I'm confident I will continue and remain with all of you for your progress and joy in the faith. That's the longer view. And just my experience in life has taught me to live with a longer view. So that's basically what I said. And the longer view is rooted in the heart of Philippians, and it's rooted in the ethic of the Sermon on the Mount, the life practice of the Sermon on the Mount, which tells us to love not only our allies and our friends, but to love our enemies, this radical love of Jesus. And that's essential and crucial for this longer view. So does that make sense? And of course, it was silence. Yeah. So, yeah, that wasn't bad. It was just about 5 minutes or so. So I'll just end this the same way. Okay. So yeah, the longer view, reflecting the spirit of Philippians and anchored in the ethic of Christ in the Sermon on the Mount, that allows us to weather whatever election season and the ebb and flow of political regimes and governments, as we anchor into a deeper reality. Does that make sense?